The wrench slipped from my oily fingers and clattered against the sun-baked cobblestones of the courtyard, echoing like a gunshot in the lazy Andalusian afternoon. Grace knelt there, unflinching, her hazel eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach twist, not from the heat, but from the way she whispered, "Hadley, I've been waiting for you to see me, really see me, for longer than you know." And just like that, the bike chain I'd been cursing all morning became the least broken thing between us, as her hand brushed mine, not in repair, but in revelation. I'd come to this sleepy corner of western Spain 3 months ago, chasing the ghost of a summer that promised escape from the suffocating sameness of my life back in Seattle. At 22, with a backpack full of half-read philosophy books and a heart bruised from a college romance that fizzled like cheap fireworks, I figured Andalusia, with its winding whitewashed streets, endless fields of sunflowers nodding under cobalt skies, and the faint strum of flamenco guitars drifting from open windows, would stitch me back together. My friend Alex had insisted I crash at her family's finca, a rambling olive farm on the outskirts of Ronda, perched like a forgotten postcard above sheer cliffs that plunged into the Guadalevin River Gorge. "Mom's got space," Alex had texted, her words casual as ever. "And trust me, she'll love fixing whatever mess you drag in." Alex and I had bonded over late-night ramen in our dorms, trading stories of overbearing parents and dreams too big for our rainy Pacific Northwest hometown. She was the bold one, with her cropped black hair and tattooed arms, always dragging me to protests or dive bars where we'd laugh until our sides ached. But Alex had bolted for Spain right after graduation, lured by some expat artist collective in Malaga. Me? I was just tagging along, or so I told myself, nursing a vague notion of finding myself amid the tapas and siestas. The finca was a world unto itself. Terracotta-tiled roofs sagging under bougainvillea vines, a courtyard fountain trickling like forgotten gossip, and groves stretching out like green fingers toward the horizon. Grace ran the place with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd weathered storms you could only guess at from the lines etched around her eyes. At 45, she was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying, auburn waves streaked with silver, caught back in a loose braid that swung as she moved, sun-freckled skin that spoke of decades under this relentless Mediterranean sun, and a laugh that rumbled low like distant thunder over the Sierra de las Nieves mountains. She'd moved here from California 20 years back, after burying her husband in a car wreck that left her with Alex, a toddler then, and a farm that was more debt than dream. "Spain saved me," she'd say over glasses of Rioja at dinner, her voice carrying that soft American lilt, all vowels rounded like the hills. Or maybe I saved it. I arrived on a rattling bus from Seville, my beat-up trek bike slung over one shoulder like a defeated soldier. The chain had snapped halfway through the Sierra, leaving me pedaling in futile circles until a kindly old shepherd flagged down a truck. Alex hugged me at the gate, her enthusiasm a whirlwind of cheek kisses and rapid-fire Spanish I could barely parse. "Hadley, Dios, you look like you wrestled a bull. Come on, Mama's in the workshop." Grace emerged from the shadowed barn, wiping her hands on a rag that smelled of motor oil and earth. She was in overalls then, sleeves pushed up to reveal forearms corded from years of pruning and hauling, and she sized me up with a grin that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Well, if it isn't Alex's troublemaker. Hand over that beast, let's see what you've done to it." Her handshake was firm, callous palms enveloping mine, and in that instant I felt oddly anchored, like the farm's ancient olive trees rooting me to this foreign soil. Those first weeks blurred into a rhythm as steady as the cicadas' hum. Mornings I'd join Grace in the groves, learning to twist the nets under trees heavy with fruit, the air thick with the scent of crushed leaves and distant sea salt from the Costa del Sol. She'd teach me the old ways, how to spot the perfect harvest moon, when the olives swelled just right, her stories weaving through the branches like smoke. "My folks were apple farmers up in Sonoma," she'd say, her voice dropping soft as we rested against gnarled trunks. "But this is poetry and dirt." Alex teased us relentlessly, calling it the lesbian apprenticeship, but I laughed it off, heat rising in my cheeks. I'd always dated guys, safe, predictable ones who quoted Kerouac but never left the suburbs. Grace was just different. Maternal, maybe. A mentor in this sun-drenched exile. Afternoons were for the workshop, a stone outbuilding cluttered with tools that gleamed like relics. My bike became our shared project, a stubborn relic from my Portland days that refused to stay tuned. Grace had a gift for it, her hand steady as she adjusted spokes or lubed the gears, explaining torque and tension with the patience of a poet reciting verse. "See here," she'd murmur, guiding my fingers along the frame, her breath warm against my ear. "It's all about balance. Push too hard and it snaps." I'd nod, mesmerized not by the mechanics but by the way her hazel eyes lit with focus, like she was coaxing secrets from the metal. Evenings we'd gather on the terrace as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, painting the gorge in strokes of ochre and lavender. Alex would strum her guitar, belting out covers of Joni Mitchell with a voice like cracked honey, while Grace poured sangria into clay cups etched with Moorish patterns. I'd sketch in my journal, quick lines of the jagged Puente Nuevo bridge arching over the abyss, or Grace's profile against the fading light, feeling a pull I couldn't name, a homesickness for something I'd never had. It was on one such evening 3 weeks in that the first crack appeared. Alex had dashed off to a poetry slam in Rhonda, leaving Grace and me to the fireflies and the low crackle of the chimenea. We'd polished off a bottle of local vermouth, the kind that tasted of figs and forgotten summers, and conversation turned lazy, meandering from farm woes to the ache of raising a wild child alone. "Alex was fire from the start," Grace said, staring into the flames. "Her dad. He was the steady one. Gone too soon." Her voice hitched just a fraction and I reached out, impulsive, covering her hand with mine. It was rough, warm, alive with the pulse of someone who'd rebuilt from ruins. She didn't pull away. Instead, her thumb traced a slow circle on my skin, and the air thickened, charged like the storm clouds gathering over the Atlantic. "You remind me of her, you know," she murmured, eyes lifting to mine. "Not in looks, God no, but in that quiet fire. The way you question everything. Like the world's a puzzle you refuse to leave unsolved." I swallowed, the sangria souring in my throat. "I'm just fumbling through, Grace. You're the one who makes it look easy." She smiled then, sad and sweet, and leaned in, not to kiss but to press her forehead to mine, a gesture so tender it stole my breath. "Easy? Oh, Hadley. Nothing about this is easy." We pulled apart as thunder rumbled distant, but the moment lingered. A seed planted in fertile soil I hadn't known was barren. The bike stayed broken for days after that, a silent accusation in the courtyard. I avoided the workshop, burying myself in hikes along the senderos that snaked through cork oak forests, where wild goats bleated from rocky perches and the wind carried whispers of ancient Berber songs. Alex noticed, of course she always did. "What's with the brooding hikes? Spill, chica. Is it the ex back home texting you bad poetry again?" I shrugged, kicking a pebble into a ravine. "Nah. Just adjusting. Spain's a lot." She punched my arm, light but pointed. "Or maybe it's Mama-esque cooking. Those paellas are lethal." But her eyes sharpened, and I wondered if she saw the flush I couldn't hide. By week's end, the chain gave out for good during a solo ride to the Mercado in Rhonda. I pushed the trek home under a punishing noon sun, sweat stinging my eyes, cursing every rutted mile. Grace was waiting when I staggered through the gate, her face a mask of concern etched deeper by the shadows. "Jesus, kid, what happened? Here, lean it against the wall." She took charge without a word, wheeling the bike into the workshop and gesturing me to a stool. As she worked, the silence stretched taut, broken only by the clink of tools and the distant coo of doves in the rafters. I watched her, mesmerized by the grace in her name, the fluid arch of her back as she bent, the stray auburn curl escaping her braid to brush her cheek. "You don't have to do this," I said finally, voice small. "I can figure it." "Hush." She straightened, wiping her brow with the back of her wrist, leaving a smudge of grease like war paint. "Let me help. For once, just let someone help." Her tone brooked no argument, so I sat, fidgeting with a loose thread on my shorts, as she diagnosed the damage with murmured curses in a Spanglish all her own. The air hummed with unsaid things, the kind that build like pressure in a fault line. When she finally straightened, chain mended and frame true, she handed me the wrench. Not the bike but the tool, her fingers lingering on mine. "There," she said, voice low as confession. "Good as new. But Hadley, it's not the bike that's stuck. It's us." My heart hammered, a wild thing caged. "What do you mean?" She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the olive oil on her skin, the faint lavender from her soap. Her eyes, those damn hazel pools, held storms I'd never weathered. "I've watched you these weeks, sketching the cliffs like you're mapping your soul. laughing with Alex like she's your anchor. And every time you look my way I feel seen. For the first time in years. Not as the mom or the widow or the farmer scraping by. Just Grace. I froze, the wrench heavy as lead in my palm. This was Alex's mother. The woman who'd bandaged my scraped knees from a tumble in the groves. Who'd slipped extra bread onto my plate at dinner with a wink. But now, in the slanted light filtering through the olive wood shutters, she was something else. A woman alive with quiet hunger, her breath mingling with mine in the charged space between. Grace, words failed, tangled in the web of loyalty and longing. Alex's face flashed in my mind, her easy grin, our shared secrets. This was betrayal wrapped in tenderness, a line I hadn't known I was towing. She cupped my cheek then, thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Don't say anything yet. Just think, because I'm done pretending this pull isn't real. The wrench fell again, but this time it was my world that shattered. Dawn broke over the finca like a hesitant apology, gilding the olive leaves in fragile gold as I slipped from my room, boots silent on the cool tile floor. Sleep had been a cruel tease. Fragments of dreams where Grace's touch lingered like smoke, and Alex's laughter twisted into accusation. I couldn't face breakfast, the clatter of plates and murmured good mornings that would force normalcy on this unraveling knot. Instead, I grabbed my mended bike and pedaled into the mist-shrouded valleys, the chain whispering smooth under my tires, a mocking reminder of her care. The roads twisted like veins through the countryside, past white villages clinging to hillsides like bleached bones, their church spires piercing the fog. I pushed harder, lungs burning, chasing the burn of exertion to drown the ache in my chest. How had I missed it? The way Grace's gaze had softened on me during those terrace evenings, her stories laced with a vulnerability she'd never shown Alex. Or had I? Back in Seattle, I'd chalked up my restlessness to post-grad drift, the parade of forgettable dates with guys who smelled of craft beer and unfulfilled potential. But here under this alien sky, truths I'd buried surfaced like roots cracking stone. I wasn't broken. I was awakening, and it terrified me. By midday, I'd reached the outskirts of Ronda, the town spilling over its famous gorge like a defiant spill of history. I locked the bike near the Alameda del Tahoe Park, where lovers strolled arm-in-arm under jacaranda blooms. Their whispers a language of ease I envied. Hunger gnawed, so I ducked into a corner to Berna, its walls plastered with faded bullfight posters and the tang of Serrano ham hanging heavy. Over a plate of patatas bravas and a canna of crisp Alhambra beer, I pulled out my journal, scribbling furiously. What if love isn't a straight line? What if it's this, a gorge deep and unforgiving with bridges we build or burn? The words blurred as my phone buzzed. Alex. Where TF are you? Mama's pacing like a caged panther. Said you bolted without coffee. Everything good. My thumbs hovered, guilt of ice. Fine. Needed air. Back soon. Lies all of it. But the alternative, confessing the electric current that had arced between her mother and me, was a chasm too wide. I lingered in Ronda until the sun slanted low, sketching the Puente Nuevo from a vantage on the far rim, its stone arches a marvel of defiance over the void. Tourists milled below, their laughter tinny echoes, but I felt adrift, a speck against the vastness. Grace's words replayed. I'm done pretending. What did that mean for us? For Alex, who trusted me like blood. The betrayal loomed, not just mine but hers. If she knew how her mother's quiet strength had cracked my defenses, how I'd leaned into it without resistance. Pedaling home, the descent was a rush of wind and regret, the gorge falling away on my left like a swallowed scream. Dusk had settled by the time I crested the finca's hill, lamps flickering to life in the windows like wary eyes. Grace was in the courtyard, silhouetted against the barn door. A silhouette of resolve in her linen shirt and jeans faded to the hue of dry earth. She didn't speak as I approached, just held out a hand for the bike, wheeling it away without a glance. Dinner was a minefield. Alex chattered about her slam, some poet who'd recited verses on lost lovers that hit too close, she said with a dramatic eye roll, but her glances darted between us, sensing the frost. Grace served the gazpacho in silence, her movements precise, but when our eyes met over the breadbasket, a spark jumped, raw and unbidden. I excused myself early, claiming a headache, and retreated to the guest room with its iron bedstead and gauzy curtains fluttering like ghosts. Sleep evaded me again, the night alive with crickets and the occasional hoot of an owl from the Cork woods. Around midnight, a soft knock pulled me upright. Grace stood in the doorway, backlit by moonlight, a shadow holding 2 mugs of manzanilla tea steaming faintly. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, voice a murmur that bypassed my defenses. I nodded, scooting over on the bed as she perched on the edge, the mattress dipping under her weight. The tea was herbal, chamomile-laced, warming my palms as we sipped in the quiet. "I'm sorry," she said finally, staring at the steam curling like unanswered prayers. "For pushing. For making this complicated." "It's not you." I set my mug aside, the words tumbling out before I could cage them. "It's me. Back home I've only ever been with guys. And now here with you. It's like you flipped a switch I didn't know was there." Her laugh was soft, bittersweet. Ah, the great awakening. I remember mine. College, a rainy night in Berkeley. A woman with violinist's hands and eyes like storm clouds. It upended everything. She reached for my hand again, tentative, and I let her, our fingers lacing like vines seeking sun. "But Alex, she's my world, Hadley. And you're her light. We can't hurt her." The weight of it settled, heavy as the farm's ancient stones. Then what? We pretend? Go back to wrenches and olive nets? Grace's thumb stroked my knuckle, a rhythm of longing. Or we fight for it. Slowly. If you're willing. God help me, I was. In that stolen hour we talked, not of passion but of fears, of the chasms we'd both crossed alone. She confessed the loneliness after her husband's death. How Spain's embrace had been her salvation, yet left her hollow. I admitted my drift, the way relationships had felt like placeholders for something deeper, truer. When she leaned in to kiss my forehead, chaste, lingering, it was a promise fragile as eggshell. But promises crack. The next morning, Alex cornered me in the kitchen, her arms crossed like barriers. "Okay, spill. What's going on with you and Mama?" The tension's thicker than her tortilla. My blood iced. "What?" "Nothing. We're just bonding over farm stuff." She snorted, but her eyes narrowed, hurt flickering. "Bonding?" She's been humming old Joan Baez songs all week. Hasn't done that since I was a kid. And you? You're sketching her like she's the damn Mona Lisa. If something's brewing, Hadley, tell me. We're family. Guilt clawed sharp as thorns. "Alex, I swear." "Fine." She backed off, but the seed of doubt was sown. "Just don't break us." The days that followed were a delicate dance. Grace and I stole moments. A shared glance over lunch, her hand brushing mine in the groves, whispers in the workshop that left me breathless. We explored Rhonda together once, under the guise of market errands, wandering the narrow calles where flower pots overflowed from wrought iron balconies. At a tiny heladeria, we split a helado de Turin, her spoon clinking against mine, laughter bubbling as she smeared a dollop on my nose. "Messy as ever," she teased, wiping it away with her thumb, her touch lingering just a beat too long. Alex watched from afar, her smiles tighter, her guitar session solo now. I caught her once, staring out over the gorge from the terrace, a cigarette dangling forgotten from her lips, a habit she'd sworn off. "You ever feel like you're losing your anchor?" she asked when I joined her, voice raw. "Every day," I whispered, the lie tasting like ash. The betrayal brewed, slow as fermenting wine. It erupted on a sweltering August afternoon, 2 months into my stay, when a freak storm rolled in from the Atlantic, thunderheads boiling over the Sierra like divine wrath. We were in the groves, Grace and I, securing the nets against the wind's howl, when Alex burst from the house, phone in hand, face ashen. "Call from the bank," she shouted over the gale. "The loan they're foreclosing. If we don't pay up by September, the finca's gone." Grace staggered, the color draining from her face as rain lashed down in sheets. "No. I thought we had time." Alex whirled on me, eyes blazing. "This is why you need to go, Hadley. We're drowning here and you're distracting her. Playing house like it's some rom-com." The words landed like blows. Grace stepped between us, soaked to the skin, her voice a roar against the tempest. "Alexandra Marie, enough. Hadley's not the problem, it's me. We've been." The silence cracked open, wider than the gorge. Alex's gaze flicked to our clasped hands, slick with rain but unyielding. "You? With her? My best friend." Betrayal etched her features, a mirror to the storm within. "How could you, Mama?" After everything, Dad, the farm, me. Grace's shoulders slumped, defeat in every line. I love her, mihija. It's not a choice. It's just true. Alex fled then, vanishing into the downpour toward the cliffs, leaving Grace and me shattered in the mudslick grove. I wanted to chase her to mend the fracture with apologies, but Grace pulled me close, her embrace fierce against the chaos. Let her go, she murmured, lips to my temple. She'll come back. We all do eventually. But as lightning forked the sky, illuminating the ruins of what we'd built, I wondered if some bridges once burned, left only echoes. The storm passed as abruptly as it struck, leaving the finca sodden and silent, the air heavy with petrichor and unresolved grief. Alex didn't return that night or the next. Grace moved like a ghost through the chores, her hazel eyes dulled to ash, while I hovered on the periphery, useless as a blunted tool. The betrayal hung between us, a specter that turned every glance into accusation, every silence into confession. I'd come to Spain for escape, but now it felt like exile, trapped in the ruins of trust I'd helped erect. By dawn of the second day, worry gnawed deeper than guilt. Alex's phone went straight to voicemail, her artist friends in Malaga swearing they hadn't seen her. Grace paced the terrace, twisting a rosary she'd dug from a drawer, a relic from her California Catholic youth, murmuring prayers in a Spanglish litany. She knows these roads blind, she said when I joined her, voice frayed. But the gorge. After storms, it's treacherous. We searched then, piling into Grace's battered Land Rover, the engine growling like an old grievance as we rattled down paths slick with runoff. The olive groves wept rivulets of mud, and the Guadalevin swelled below, a muddy serpent churning secrets. Hours blurred, calling out her name until our throats ached, flagging down goat herds with promises of reward, scanning the cliffs for a flash of black hair or tattooed skin. In the village, whispers spread like oil. La Hija de Grace vanished like mist, eyes turned sympathetic, but laced with pity for the American widow whose daughter chased shadows. Dusk found us at the Puente Nuevo, the bridge's parapet slick under leaning lamps. Grace gripped the stone railing, her knuckles white, staring into the abyss where mist coiled like unanswered questions. I should have told her sooner, she whispered, wind tugging at her braid. Eased her into it. But love, it doesn't wait for permission. I slid my arm around her waist, tentative, the contact a lifeline in the chill. You couldn't know. And Alex, she's fire, remember? She'll burn hot, but she'll forgive. Her laugh cracked hollow. Optimist. That's what I love about you. That stubborn hope. The word love landed soft, a balm amid the bruise. For the first time since the storm, she turned into me, her head resting on my shoulder, the weight of her trust anchoring me more than any confession. We stood there as stars pricked the velvet sky, the gorge a dark hush below, and in that fragile truce, I traced patterns on her back. Not seduction but solace, the human need to hold against the unraveling. Alex reappeared at midnight, materializing in the courtyard like a specter, mud-caked boots tracking the tiles, her eyes red-rimmed but fierce. She'd holed up in a pension near the bullring, nursing a bottle of anise and a playlist of angry punk rock, the kind that screamed of fractured homes. Grace rushed her, arms enveloping before words could weaponize, but Alex stiffened, pulling back with a flinch. Not yet, Mama. Her gaze slid to me, a blade sheathed in sorrow. I need to understand. How long? Was it? While I was gone. Grace shook her head, tears carving tracks down her cheeks. No. It grew slow like the olives. You brought her here, Alex. Gave me a friend who saw past the farmwife facade. Alex sank onto the fountain's edge, the water's trickle a counterpoint to her ragged breaths. And you, Hadley? My roommate, my confidant. You looked at her and saw. What? A crush? A fling to spice up your gap year? The accusation stung, but truth was sharper. More, I said, kneeling before her, rain still dripping from my curls. I saw strength. Kindness that doesn't demand repayment. Grace isn't a fling. She's the first person who's made me feel like I belong somewhere. I hesitated, then added, soft as plea. And I never meant to hurt you. You're my family, Alex. It doesn't erase that. She searched my face, then Grace's, the storm in her eyes ebbing to embers. It changes everything. The three of us, we were this perfect messy unit. Now it's fractured. Grace knelt too, bridging us with her presence.
Fractúrese al stronger, mi amor.
If we let them. She took Alex's hand, then mine, forming a circle that trembled but held. I lost your father young. Poured everything into this land, into you. But Hadley. She's shown me joy again. Not replacement. Addition. The night deepened, confessions spilling like the gorge's hidden springs. Alex railed at the secrecy, the fear of losing her mother to a love that mirrored her own unspoken heartaches. I've dated women too, you know, she admitted finally, voice breaking. But hiding it here? In this macho backwater? It's easier to bury. Grace pulled her close, mother to daughter, and I watched, heart swelling with the raw humanity of it. Flaws laid bare, not as weapons but as maps to mercy. Dawn crept in as we talked, the first light gilding the courtyard in forgiveness's hue. Alex didn't absolve us outright. Trust is a vine, not a switch, but she nodded when Grace suggested we fight the foreclosure together. Sell the old vines on the east slope, she said, practical now. And that vintage Rioja stash. Buy time. The weeks that followed were reconstruction, brick by tender brick. The bank relented, barely. After Grace's impassioned plea in a stuffy Malaga office, her American tenacity laced with Andalusian fire. Alex and I mended through forced proximity. Long hikes where we'd vent over thermoses of café con leche, her sharing tales of crushes lost to fear, me admitting how her mother's quiet revolution had sparked my own. Grace orchestrated it all, her love a steady current. A hand on my lower back in the groves. A note slipped into my sketchbook. You're my bridge, Hadley. Don't let go. Harvest came fierce that September, the olive swollen with summer's kiss. We three worked side by side, nets billowing under a sky washed clean, laughter punctuating the ache of bent backs. One evening as the sun dipped behind the Sierra, casting the gorge in molten amber, Alex raised a jar of freshly pressed oil, green and peppery. To fractures, she toasted, eyes twinkling. And the fools who think they can't mend. Grace's gaze met mine over the rim, warm as hearthfire, and I felt it then, not just love but belonging. The kind that withstands storms, betrayals bite, the weight of worlds appended. I extended my stay through winter, the finca transforming under frost-kissed vines, our bond deepening in the quiet. Grace and I stole walks along the senderos, hands linked now without shame, discussing futures laced with maybes. A shared workshop in Ronda, perhaps, or plots for an American-style cafe amid the tapas bars. Alex dated a painter from the collective, her sketches blooming bolder, infused with colors she'd once muted. Spring bloomed defiant, wildflowers carpeting the cliffs in defiant pinks and yellows. On my last night, a reluctant departure for a job back in Seattle, promises of visits like lifelines, we gathered on the terrace under a canopy of stars. Grace pressed a small olive wood box into my palm, inside a silver wrench pendant, etched with our initials entwined. For the fixes ahead, she murmured, her kiss finally on my lips, soft, sure, a seal on our unfinished poem. Alex hugged me fierce, whispering, "Don't be a stranger, okay? This family's got room for wanderers." As I pedaled away at dawn, the trek humming true over the rising road, the gorge fell behind like a chapter closed but cherished. Spain hadn't just healed me, it had rewritten me, in hues of hazel eyes and olive green, in the drama of loves that dare to bridge divides. And in the rear view of my heart, Grace waved from the finca's gate, a figure small against the vast, but vast in my soul. Life's not a straight path, I'd learned. It's a gorge treacherous and true, spanned by the brave hearts who choose to cross.